mind, then that makes all of us brothers and sisters in the family. All of us. He realized he was a neighbor to everyone at all times, in all places. If you wholeheartedly love God, if you believe it, it makes you care. And if you care, you're going to do. Depending on the circumstances, depending on our locations where life takes us, our neighbors change, but there's no end to them. Someone else is always there, next in line, the next person beside you. The implication of that greatest commandment is it's not possible to identify anyone who is not your neighbor. And that's because to be a neighbor, there's two defining characteristics, and it's true in the Hebrew, it's true in the Greek, and it's true in English. First of all, they are nigh unto you. That is, they are nearby. They're the ones that are crossing your path or seated beside you, standing in line in the grocery store or hunkered down on the side of the road. That one who is near you, that's the primary meaning of the word neighbor. It's somebody located near another. It's nearness that makes you a neighbor. We call those people whose property is immediately adjoining or relatively near to our house, we call them our neighbors. And Dennis and Beverly bow them. Their backyard abuts our backyard. They're neighbors, right? Or Gay Fry, she's directly across Hitchcock Street from us. Or Sally Dickens on the corner of our block. Or Marcia and Avery Ayton, who are just up the street a ways. Or Mike and Cheryl and Katie Mack, they're just down and around the corner from us. These are a few of the folks in my neighborhood, and we are neighborly. And the dictionary defines neighborliness as characteristically congenial. The dictionary talks better than I do. So proximity is the first element of being a neighbor. And that closeness of vicinity quite often leads to the second definition of a neighbor, and that is similarity of lifestyle. Characteristics that we have in common. Neighbors are friendly enough, on the surface at least, to care about one another. We help with shoveling each other's sidewalks and driveways on those suddenly deep, snowy days when you can't get ahead of it. We speak to each other when someone is walking their dog past our porch. We trade recipes and we share homemade soup. Your neighbor is someone who is nearby you and someone you perceive as like you. People can associate with one another in neighborly ways regardless of where they live, whether they're nearby or far away. We can choose to see a stranger as a neighbor if we care to, in which case we'll be polite to that person, we'll be friendly even, we'll help them if we can. If we see that stranger as a neighbor, we know how to behave. But unfortunately, many people, too many people, choose not to see other people as their neighbor if they are different from them in some way. They just won't include those people with us. Of course, the lawyer could have explained neighbor in a more acceptable sociological term. He could have said, it's to the degree that the passers-by were Jewish, they would have been the man's neighbor. Sisters and brothers in faith, from the same race, maybe they're even from the same hometown. That's a neighbor. In Jesus' day, that was the criteria that showed the social status of neighbor. It was defined. So when I ask, who is your neighbor? You could say, well, quite simply, your kind of people. Same economic status by and large, from the same faith, from the same race, from the same neighborhood. And for the Jewish lawyer, a Samaritan merchant would certainly not have been among them. You see, this lawyer wants to draw a line between those persons that he must love if he is going to fulfill God's law, and those people who he could, with a clear conscience, disregard. He wants a definition in terms. Who precisely is my neighbor? Because if he can draw the line tight enough, he can live within that boundary and feel like he is doing God's will. But instead of giving the man a definition or a list, Jesus told him a story. A man just like you was traveling, minding his own business, when he was robbed, beaten up, almost murdered for no good reason. A privileged priest passed by, a hardworking Levite passed by, but neither of them cared for him neither one of them stopped. They had other business elsewhere. The guy was not on their agenda. And then later, a Samaritan, which is someone who is not like you, someone who is not of your class, someone who is not of your race, not of your denomination, and you can fill in the blank. Maybe he was a person of color. Maybe it was a gay man or a transsexual. Maybe it was some burly biker or some young adult covered in tattoos. Maybe he was a Muslim. Maybe he was an immigrant refugee from a Middle Eastern country. Maybe he was from Mexico. But this stranger, who is not like you, who you would dismiss if you had a choice, this stranger stopped and took care of him. Today's coin collection calendar for One Great Hour of Sharing says, a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. Give 2 units in thankfulness for those who show mercy. I was struck when I read that this morning, that phrase, came near him. Because that's precisely the definition of a neighbor. It's the one who draws nigh. It's the one who comes near. It's the one who pays attention. It's the one who cares. Thursday's coin collection calendar says, One Great Hour of Sharing partners help provide basic medical supplies and psychological care to thousands of people living in refugee camps. Give 1 unit for every bottle of medicine in your house. Well, Patty and I are lucky, since neither of us have any prescriptions. We have aspirin, ibuprofen, Motrin, aches and pains. Vicks NyQuil, other over-the-counter antihistamines. We have Band-Aids, we have hydrogen peroxide, but we have no prescription medicines. We're going to get out cheap on Thursday. Saturday's coin collection says, I was sick, and you took care of me. Give 3 units to help provide medical care and prevent illness around the world. Well, that is precisely what the Samaritan merchant did for the wounded man in his day. This Samaritan stranger, who would have been generally looked down upon by the Jews, took the beaten man to an inn, promised the owner, if you care for him, when I come back, I'll pay all the extra expense. And he left the man in good hands with the promise as his collateral. Now, if you were that man, if you were the victim, if you were the suffering one, the hurt and helpless one who'd been passed by, would you believe that promise? That this guy's going to come back and pick up the tab for the rest of my care? Hello, Obamacare, are you listening? And would you believe it if it came from a Samaritan, one of them? As much as Jesus wanted that lawyer to become more compassionate, as much as Jesus, I believe, wants to prompt us to be more like that Samaritan caregiver, I think it's important that we get in touch with the victim's experience of this story. And don't be thinking that we, because we're Christian, because we let Jesus set the agenda, that we are always going to be the Savior in the story. Because that just might be Jesus. We may be the one who's feeling a bit beat up right now. We might feel like we're the ones that have been kicked to the curb, right? Or we might be as apathetic and uninvolved as the priest was, or as busy with our own agenda like the Levite was, both of whom passed the man by without so much as a howdy-do. Jesus, as we meet him in the Gospels, never passes by the one in trouble. He stops. He takes pity. He takes action. Just read all through the gospel. He's always taking action with people who are in trouble. Whether it's a leper, a woman with a fever, people with unclean spirits, an adulteress, a man with a withered hand, a lame man lying on a mat, a woman with a flow of blood, a widow, a child, a sinner of any kind. He's right there for them, with them. What can I do? What do you need? Jesus never avoids them. He never turns away. Instead, he seems to actively go out and seek the wounded ones. He sees them slumped on the side of the road. He goes into action. And when we find that we cannot move, we've been so beat down, We can't move on our own strength. Jesus says, let me lift you. And puts us on his own shoulders and takes us to a place where we can rest and recuperate. He promises all will be well. Because he cares about each one of us. He says, I will return. The one who promised his disciples that he would be with them to the end of the age is with us always, at all times. And we should take comfort in that. Jesus won't pass us by. To be more Jesus-like means that we have to see each person as our neighbor, whether they happen to be from here or from elsewhere. We see every person as a child of God who is loved by God and who is deserving of respect, period. If we can help them, we will. That's the basic golden rule, after all, right? You put yourself in their shoes. How would you like to be treated if that was you slumped on the side of the road? Now, the lawyer knew all this in his head, and he actually even said it with his mouth. The problem now is he had to move it from his mouth to his muscles. To believe is to care, and to care is to do. I saw that somewhere, a bumper sticker or a magnet. Jesus said, well, just go and do likewise. Take a risk. Get involved. Don't shake your head or close your eyes or say, I'm not involved in this. Show that God's love overcomes the hatred and the fear. Show that God's love overcomes the violence and the victimization that's all around us. Show the world that love can rebuild what's been broken. Love can create harmony between different groups. No matter how little we see of it in the media, it's possible. And the church is here to say, do it. Just do it. If Nike hadn't copyrighted that, I'd say it more often. Love can create a better future, bring a new day.